The Architect, Inheritor of Infinite Paths. If you haven't read the first book, The Gatekeeper, Master of Parallel Realities, you may want to start there. This story builds directly on the events of that journey, but if you're ready to continue. Previously on The Gatekeeper, Master of Parallel Realities, Lila was an ordinary young woman who discovered she held the power to travel between parallel realities worlds that existed side by side, each shaped by different choices and possibilities. But crossing between these worlds came with a heavy price. She became the Gatekeeper, a guardian balancing the fragile boundaries of the multiverse, carrying the burden of countless lives and destinies intertwined. Her journey was one of escape and longing, as she struggled with the weight of infinite choices and the question of what it truly means to belong. Now, in The Architect, the veil between worlds has thinned even further. Lila holds a new power, the ability not just to travel between realities, but to create them. But creation brings new dangers other shapers have awakened. The fabric of existence begins to fracture, and the Gatekeeper's timeless stillness is breaking. The story continues, and the future is no longer just about choosing a world, it's about building one. The Architect, Inheritor of Infinite Paths, Chapter 1. The Architect's burden. The world Lila stood in was not real. Not in the way she'd once known reality to be, a single, stubborn thing made of flesh and consequence, anchored to physics and time. This world shimmered slightly around the edges, as if light hadn't quite decided how to obey. Trees grew in spirals instead of straight lines. A sun hung low in a lavender sky, unmoving, warm but unyielding. Somewhere in the distance, water flowed uphill. She had built this place, and now it refused to sleep. Lila knelt at the edge of a quiet river that didn't ripple, cupping a handful of still water. No splash, no echo. Her reflection looked back, the same dark eyes, the same determined jaw. But something inside her had changed, was still changing. The key of choosing pulsed faintly beneath her shirt, slung on a chain over her chest like an anchor. It didn't glow anymore. It listened. Why won't you rest? She asked the river, the trees, the light. I gave you peace. I gave you harmony. You gave us limits. The voice came from behind her. Smooth, melodic, unfamiliar, Lila stood slowly, wiping her hands on her trousers. A woman approached across the grass, tall and barefoot, her presence stirring nothing in the air. As if even gravity chose to make way for her. Lila stepped back. You're not from here. No one is, the woman replied. Not anymore. Lila glanced at the key. It didn't warn her. You're a shaper, Lila said. The woman smiled. We are all shapers now. Some of us just remember sooner. She looked around the dreamlike landscape, tilting her head. This is your first full world, isn't it? Lila's hand clenched at her side. My third. Then you felt it. Lila didn't answer. She didn't have to. The feeling haunted every new world she built, a delayed echo, like a chord snapped somewhere far away. Creation wasn't additive, it was displacement. When she shaped something new, something old unraveled. A child never born, a memory wiped from a mother's heart. A rebellion that never happened. Lila had not yet learned what to do with that grief. Who are you? She asked. The woman looked up at the lavender sun. Once, I was a gardener. In a world where names were traded for stories, that's not an answer. It's not the question that matters, the woman said, stepping closer. It's the consequence of asking it. Then, quietly, you've seen him again, haven't you? Lila's breath caught. The Gatekeeper, the woman nodded. He's stirring. That's impossible. He's silent, buried, eternal. She shook her head. He's waking because you are not the only one building. Silence fell. The grass at their feet hummed faintly. Then, what do you want from me? The woman looked at her kindly. To understand what you've inherited. She reached out not to the key, but to Lila's shoulder and touched it gently. A wave of warmth surged through Lila's bones, and with it came a memory not her own. A tall tower with a spiraled heart, a hand touching a glowing sphere, a child laughing in a world where death had never been born. Then, gone, the woman stepped back. Creation is not about power. It is about responsibility. And reckoning, she turned to leave, her form already blurring at the edges. The others will come soon. They won't all ask for permission. Wait, Lila said. Who are you? The woman paused at the edge of the dreamlike glade. I'm the second, she said. But not the last. And then she vanished. Lila stood alone again, the world around her pulsing faintly with breath and meaning. She looked down at her hands. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, I'm sorry, she whispered to the river, to the air, to all the worlds she could no longer unmake. But even her apology reshaped something. Chapter 2. The world that forgot it was made. Tomas woke with the distinct sensation that something was missing, but as always, he couldn't name what. The sun filtered through the window like it did every morning, golden and precise, casting shadows that lined up exactly with the seams in the floor. His books were arranged alphabetically on the shelf. He was sure he hadn't done that, but they were always like that now. Even the breeze that flowed in through the cracked pane smelled faintly of lavender and iron, as though it had been brewed rather than blown. He sat up slowly, pushing the covers aside. His fingers brushed the edge of the knitstand. A piece of paper was there, a note. You are not the first. You are not the only. Remember the hollow R. Tomas stared at the words. They weren't written in his handwriting. They were burned into the paper, literally charred into it. The letters crisp-edged and precise. The way fire leaves a message only when it's been commanded. Hollow R, he said aloud. Nothing happened. But something inside him shifted. Mother. He called, no answer. He stood, padded across the quiet floor. The hallway was too still, the silence unnatural. His mother always played music in the morning's old piano reels, soft and cyclical, but now the house held its breath. When he reached the kitchen, he found the calendar blank, not just the day or the month, all of it. Every square had been erased, the paper smooth and uncreased, like time itself had forgotten how to move forward. He stared at it for a long time, his heart crawling up into his throat. Something's wrong, he said quietly. Then a voice answered from behind him. You weren't supposed to notice. Tomas turned sharply. A girl stood in the doorway, young, maybe 12, with bright amber eyes and clothes that didn't quite match the era. She held a folded umbrella despite the sun outside. Who are you? Tomas demanded. I'm from a place that used to be real, she said. Until this world replaced it, he blinked. Replaced, she nodded. You were made, Tomas. This world was built by someone who didn't know you'd wake up. That's impossible, is it? She said gently, stepping forward. Then why can't you remember yesterday? Or your mother's face, or the name of the town we're in? He opened his mouth, stop, He couldn't remember. Not the town, not yesterday, not even the color of his mother's eyes. Panic clawed at him. Why me? Because the cracks always start with someone, she said. And this time, it's you. Outside the window, the breeze stopped mid-blow, a bird froze in midair. And far above them, the lavender sky rippled, like fabric under stress. Chapter 3. Shapers Among Us. The first time Naira bent reality, it was by accident. She was running late for her shift at the clinic. The tram had broken down again and the air was thick with metallic dust from the sky filters. She had just muttered, I wish this day would skip itself, in frustration when the world stuttered. The sound of the street vanished. When it came back, the tram was gone, and she was standing at the back door of the clinic, keys already in hand. At the time, she thought she'd blacked out, but today, she tried it on purpose. Naira stood on the rooftop of the dormitory, her dark curls whipping in the rising wind, both hands pressed together like she was praying or bracing for recoil. I want the sun to rise early, she said aloud. Nothing. She narrowed her eyes and focused. The wind slowed, as if listening. I want the sun to rise now. The sky did not obey immediately, but it did hesitate. The pale gray horizon shimmered with the faintest smear of orange, a ripple, like a skipped beat in a song she knew too well. And then, behind her, A low voice murmured, "Careful what you ask." She spun. A boy leaned against the doorframe leading back into the stairwell. His jacket was oversized, face angular, hands in his pockets. His eyes had that strange shimmer, the same hue Naira had seen once before in a dream she didn't remember having. "Who are you?" she asked. "Someone like you," he said. "I doubt that." He stepped closer. "You've been shifting for 3 weeks. You're clumsy, but the changes are sticking. That makes you a shaper, whether you like it or not." She frowned. "You say that like it's a disease." "No," he said. "A responsibility." Naira laughed once, sharp. "Responsibility? I can barely afford dinner and you're telling me I create things by accident." "You create possibilities," he said, unfazed. "But every possibility you build destroys another." "That's what you don't see yet." She felt the wind stop entirely. No rustling. No breeze, just stillness. He stepped closer and looked her in the eye. "Tell me, Naira, what did the sun have to give up so you could see it early?" For a moment, her mouth went dry. He handed her something, a folded piece of old cloth. Inside, a coin that shimmered not with gold, but with memory, a face she didn't know, weeping beneath a rising sun. Then he turned and walked away. And Naira was left alone, staring at the sun that wasn't supposed to rise, yet wondering if it was still real, or if she had broken something just by asking. Chapter 4. The Gatekeeper's Fracture. The gate had never grown before. It was not made of metal or stone, but something older, woven from the rules between realities themselves. It had always stood silent at the center of the in-between, beyond time, beyond matter, an axis around which worlds turned. And yet now it groaned, like a hinge long denied movement had finally dared to shift. The Gatekeeper opened his eyes. He did not need to sleep, but he had learned long ago that stillness was a kind of silence, and silence was necessary for balance. But balance was no longer holding. He stepped down from the obsidian days at the gate's edge. Each footfall echoed not through the chamber, but through probability. Entire realities trembled at his movement, like threads pulled taut. The gate shimmered before him, its countless doors flaring with soft color, some fading, some flaring, some simply gone. One had collapsed entirely, another had rewritten itself 3 times since his last awareness. Someone had reshaped the weave more than one. "Lila," he murmured. His voice was the sound of eons moving, of rivers freezing mid-flow. He felt her imprint even now, lingering in the currents of the multiverse. Her choices hadn't just pierced the fabric, they had started to rearrange it. The key of choosing was never meant to be used in this way, not this frequently, not this freely, not by someone so young. Then he felt it, the tremor, not in the doors, but in himself. His hand flexed involuntarily. That had never happened before. The Gatekeeper frowned, then reached into the space between spaces. He conjured a mirror, not one of glass, but of continuity, forged by thought. What it showed him made no sense. His face, unchanged for millennia, was starting to fracture. Thin silver lines, hairline cracks, ran down the left side of his brow like a porcelain mask under stress. Not visible to the eye, but visible to the truth. "I do not fracture," he said. "Yet here you are," replied a voice behind him. The Gatekeeper turned. No one had approached, unnoticed in centuries. A figure stood just beyond the furthest door, a woman cloaked in twilight, her eyes vast and filled with stars. "You remember me," she said. He stared. "That is not possible. You buried the memory," she said gently. "You locked it behind the first gate, but now that it's open, you remember." The Gatekeeper's silence was thunderous. "You were the first," he whispered, "before even I." She nodded. "And now you see what your stillness has allowed." The gate moaned again. This time, one of the hinges cracked. Chapter 5. The war of possible tomorrows they weren't supposed to be able to touch. That was the first rule of divergence. Futures could be seen, glimpsed, even predicted, but never intersected. They were roads, not rivers, parallel, not intertwined. Now they were bleeding into each other, and someone was making it happen. "Get down," Wyson shouted. grabbing Ray by the collar and yanking her behind the shattered pillar. A pulse of violet light shot overhead and struck a monument that no longer remembered who it honored. The sky cracked open for a heartbeat, revealing another one layered behind it, darker, angrier. What the hell was that? Ray gasped. Variant collapse, Wyson said, loading another round into his pulse repeater. The 7th today. That one looked like a timeline that tried to merge peace treaties from two contradictory futures, and that causes lightning. No, he said, that causes reality infection. The lightning's just the prelude. Ray looked out over the battlefield. No blood. Just fragments, memories floating in the air like ash, impossible geometries twisting the ground. A single tree growing both forward and backward in time, its roots aging while its leaves regrew. They were in a convergence zone now. One of the many being torn open across the seams of the multiverse, all because the shapers were no longer making isolated changes, they were fighting over futures. A woman soared overhead, leaving a trail of fire that flickered with hundreds of faces, each one a version of herself. She crashed into another fighter midair, their forms colliding and merging for half a second before exploding into particles of unfinished possibilities. They're rewriting history like it's a battleground, Ray said. It is a battleground, Wyson replied. And it's spreading. Whole timelines are arming themselves now. One of the variants has declared a war on alternate selves. Calls it preemptive sovereignty, she shuddered. Is Lila watching this? She has to be. Then why isn't she stopping it? Wyson turned toward the pulsing tear in the sky, the rift that bled futures like spilled paint, and frowned. Because she's not the only architect anymore, he said. And one of them just built a war. Chapter 6. The Girl Who Built Without Grief. Alara never cried, not because she was cold or cruel, but because she had never lost anything. Not truly. She stood at the edge of the city she had crafted, streets gleaming with polished glass, skies streaked with soft pinks and golds, buildings that seemed to breathe with light. People moved through it, smiling, whole, and touched by pain. Do you really think this is possible? Her visitor asked, voice low, skeptical. Alara turned, the faintest smile curving her lips. Isn't it? The woman who had come to see her was older, weathered by too many worlds and too many choices. Every world costs something, Alara. Every new creation carries the shadow of what's been lost. Alara folded her arms. Not mine, not yet, the visitor said gently. But grief is the price of reality. You cannot build without it. Alara's eyes flickered with something unreadable. I built this world for myself. No past, no pain, no sacrifice. A perfect place where no one suffers. The visitor inched forward, their voice barely audible. What if someone else ended up shouldering the cost, someone you don't even realize is there? Alara's smile tightened. Then that's their burden, not mine. Do you know what that means? The visitor's eyes searched Alara's face. It means you've become a thief of worlds, stealing from futures and pasts alike. Alara shook her head. I'm a creator, a builder. Creators bear the weight of their worlds, the visitor said. But builders without grief risk unraveling everything. A wind stirred around them. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed, though Alara hadn't placed children in this city. Why do you stay? Alara asked, voice sharp. Why come here to remind me of pain I refuse to feel? The visitor smiled sadly. Because someone has to remember. Alara looked away at the gleaming city below. Then I'm not the architect you hoped for. No, the visitor said softly, but perhaps the one the multiverse needs. Chapter 7, Echoes of the First Architect. The chamber was dark, but the air thrummed with power, ancient and restless. Lila stepped carefully over cracked tiles that glowed faintly beneath her feet, each step awakening whispers buried in the stone. The walls pulsed with shifting glyphs, flickering like stars caught between collapse and creation. Why bring me here? She asked, the voice that echoed from the shadows. Because it's time you remembered, came the reply, soft but undeniable. From the darkness emerged a figure, tall, draped in robes woven from threads of light and shadow. Her eyes held the weight of countless worlds and a smile both weary and knowing. "I am Nara," she said. "The first architect, the one who forged the key." Lila's breath caught. "I thought you vanished beyond all known worlds." Nara's gaze deepened. "I did, to protect the multiverse from the power I once wielded and nearly destroyed. Why give the key again?" Lila asked, voice trembling. "Why me?" "Because the key cannot be held by one alone," Nara said. "Creation is a song sung by many voices. But beware, the more who hold it, the greater the discord." Lila looked at her hands, feeling the familiar weight beneath her shirt. "I've already seen that," Nara nodded. "Each world you build echoes through the infinite paths, changing futures, pasts, and the fragile present. And the gatekeeper, he stirs because the harmony is breaking." Lila swallowed hard. "Is there a way to fix it?" The first architect's smile was faint. "You don't fix a multiverse by holding the key tighter. You fix it by learning to share its power and knowing when to let go." A sudden gust of wind swept through the chamber, carrying with it voices, laughter, cries, and whispers from uncountable realities. "Remember this," Nara said. "The true architect is not the one who builds worlds, but the one who understands what must be left unbuilt." And then she was gone, a flicker of light folding into shadow. Lila stood alone, the key beating softly against her heart. The weight of infinite paths settled heavy on her shoulders. Chapter 8. The collapse of all doors. The corridors between worlds were closing. Lila ran through the in-between, the space stretching and folding beneath her feet like a living maze. Doors, countless doors that had once gleamed with promise now flickered and fractured, edges crumbling like dust in the wind. "Stop," she shouted, reaching out to grasp a shimmering portal that dissolved before her fingers touched it. Behind her, the air rippled and a voice echoed through the void. "You cannot save them all." Lila spun. Standing in the shadows was Naira, her amber eyes fierce but filled with fear. "What's happening?" Lila demanded. "The Shapers," Naira said, voice trembling. "They pushed the multiverse to the brink. Every change, every fracture, every new world, they're breaking the gates." Lila's heart hammered. "But if the doors collapse, if the gates fall, what happens to the worlds?" Naira swallowed hard. "They collapse with them. Reality folds in on itself. Possibilities vanish. The infinite paths become one dead end." Lila clenched her fists. "Then we have to stop it. We have to fix the gate." Naira shook her head. "There's no fixing what's already broken." From the shadows, another figure stepped forward. "Alara, the girl who built without grief." "You're wrong," Alara said quietly. "There's a way, but it's not by holding on tighter." Lila looked between them. "Then how?" Alara's eyes shimmered with a strange light. "By letting go." "Letting go," Lila echoed. "Yes," Alara said, voice steady. "Of control, of fear, of the idea that we can create perfect worlds without cost." Nara nodded slowly. "It's the only way to stop the collapse. To let the doors close and open again." The in-between trembled beneath them, the sound of cracking worlds like distant thunder. Lila took a deep breath, feeling the key pulse warm against her chest. "Then we start here," she said. Together, as the doors flickered one last time, the three of them stepped forward into the unknown. Chapter 9. The Return of the One Who Vanished. The sky above the in-between shattered. A ripple tore through the fabric of reality, fracturing light and sound into shards that rained down like splintered glass. The gatekeeper's chamber trembled as the air thickened with ancient power. "Lila," a voice echoed not from the key, but from everywhere and nowhere all at once. She looked up to see a figure stepping through the rupture, a woman draped in shifting shadows, her eyes glowing with the weight of forgotten eons. "It's her," Naira whispered, "the one who vanished." Alara's breath caught. "The first architect." The woman smiled, a smile both terrifying and tender. "I have returned," she said. "Not as a ruler, but as a reckoning." Lila moved ahead, her heart thudding in her chest. "Why now? After everything, why return?" "The multiverse is unraveling," said the first architect. The key has changed hands too many times, abused, broken, scattered. The gatekeeper is weakening, and the shapers. They're ripping the endless threads of reality apart. Lila tightened her grip on the key. Then what do you want from us? To remind you all of what creation truly costs, the first architect replied. And to teach you what it means to inherit power. Naira glanced at Alara. Is she a threat? Alara shook her head slowly. She's a force. Neither friend nor foe, just inevitable. The first architect raised her hand, and the shattered sky pulsed with light. Prepare yourselves, she said. Because the final path is about to be written, and with that, the world held its breath. Chapter 10, The Choice That Builds the Final Path. The chamber hummed with raw power. Around them, the gates flickered doors to every world, every possibility, every story yet untold. The air shimmered as the first architect stood beside Lila, Naira, and Alara, their faces illuminated by the key's soft glow. This is it, Lila said, voice steady but heavy. The moment we've been building toward. Naira glanced at her, eyes fierce. And the moment we could lose everything. Alara folded her arms, her usual calm replaced by a tension Lila hadn't seen before. The final path isn't a path at all. It's a choice. Lila looked down at the key in her hands. It felt like a heartbeat, fragile, insistent. The first architect's voice cut through the silence. You hold the power to create or to destroy. To bind the multiverse or to set it free, Lila swallowed. But if I create a perfect world, will anyone else belong in it but me? The first architect smiled gently. That is the question. One that every architect must answer. Naira stepped forward. What if we choose to let go? To surrender control, Alara nodded. To trust the infinite paths to unfold without us forcing their shape. The chamber pulsed with energy. The gates behind them whispered secret possibilities of peace, chaos, unity, and solitude. Lila took a deep breath. I'm ready. She raised the key, feeling its warmth spread through her fingers, then through the room, through the multiverse itself. Together, she said, looking at the others. Together, they echoed. With that, Lila made the choice not to build alone, but to share the power, to weave the infinite paths with respect and humility. The gates flared bright, then softened, opening wide. A new world began, not perfect, but alive, full of stories yet to be told. And in that moment, Lila understood. Creation was not control, it was connection.